This is Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley and Pete Sampson. It's Thursday, September 1st. We're a little bit more than 48 hours away from number 5 Notre Dame at number 2 Ohio State. The Irish are still 17.5-point underdogs. We've kicked this around for 8 months now. Gentlemen, your thoughts as we're within a couple days of these two teams finally doing battle in Ohio Stadium.
Yeah, 8 months is a good point because it sure seems like people can talk themselves into a lot of things over this 8-month period. People come back and forth on what to expect from Ohio State's passing game, to what Ohio State's passing game might be missing, to what Notre Dame can do and can't do. And we need to see the game more than ever before. This is easily the most hyped, anticipated opener because I don't remember Michigan being quite like this, right? There's just so many more elements to this with the new head coach too. I think the new head coach is probably part of that. We used to say that Brian Kelly, even with his success late, it was one of those things where like, well, if it's not the Michigan game, people aren't showing up as much in Notre Dame Stadium. But maybe it was the big offseason change and the distaste for the former coach. It just seems like this has been the biggest buildup and thus longest buildup I can recall.
Well, I think people know the score in college football now. It's Alabama, it's Georgia, it's Ohio State. Like, those are the teams at the top of the food chain. And Notre Dame probably gets more shots to test themselves against those programs than you would think, based on some of the playoff appearances in the ACC championship games. But at most, you're getting, once a year, once every other year. You just don't get opportunities like this a whole lot. And that's aside from the whole Marcus Freeman going back to his alma mater, and the 2002 national championship team being honored, and sort of all the extracurriculars that go with that. And I mean, Freeman was pretty curt about it today. Writing on him and his relationship with Jim Tressel this week, and talking to his family, like how competitive he is, I don't think comes through in a whole lot of press conferences because he's a little more easygoing. Started to leak through today. But how competitive he is, I mean, he is a ruthless competitor. And I think you're going to see that on Saturday night. I think we sort of heard it a little bit on Thursday. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how he has the team wired about 7:00 on Saturday. Because I think he's probably going to put a lot of thought into that.
I think you make a good point there, Pete, because I think we have a question in the second segment about physicality and what preseason's been like. Maris Leopold got hurt. What was it? Like 10 days before the opener last year. Yeah. And that's because the practice was so physical. And the physicality, I think that's something that has definitely been ramped up on the practice field. And maybe it's not real apparent to everybody about how competitive Marcus Freeman is, but I think that we've come to realize that and discover that as he's about to become, the head coach for his first full-time season. So, yeah, I mean, I he was dialed in. The whole question about emotions about going into Ohio Stadium. Tim, you said you were a little bit surprised at that, I wasn't, because I think that's. I'm not sure that he's always going to suffer fools gladly as he gets further into this tenure. Not that it was a foolish question, but the expression "suffering fools gladly." I don't think that he's got a whole lot of time for that. He knows what he needs to get done, and I think that he's pushing forward. And at this point, game face is on right now, and I think that he showed that today.
Yeah, I guess statute of limitations has run out here. I mean, we know there was some fights at his behest last year, his first year as defensive coordinator at Notre Dame on the practice field. And he has said a couple times, what did he say? He said it in the spring for the first time. And then he said this is how at his last press conference, this is how I need you to prepare. You have to trust me. This is what I need from you to be ready for the opener. And even in the spring, when there were some guys getting hurt, and remember the practice we saw where Lorenzo Styles just got lit up by DJ Brown, and we thought he was gone for a long time, and he was okay. Freeman's like, yeah, I mean, we have to be physical. I was like, wow, this is spring. So he definitely had a plan, and that's part of it. And I mean, every fan wants to hear that, right? It sounds so much better than thud and things like that. But of course, now they have to ramp it back down. In fairness, Brian Kelly had physical camps too. I mean, Brian Kelly was the head coach last year, but we do know that Marcus Freeman He likes him to go at it a little bit in practice when he has a chance.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. I mean, I think as we move forward, that's a real positive for this program moving forward. Pete, I don't know if you said it or if people quoted you saying it and it was inaccurate, but I mean, I think at some point you said, Ohio State was definitely going to win this game a while back anyway.
Yeah,
do you feel any?
Yeah, so that was like in December. Somebody asked me in my mailbag,
Yeah.
like, when are you 100% certain Marcus Freeman will have the first loss of his Notre Dame career? And I said September 3rd.
Oh, as opposed to the Fiesta Bowl.
Right. Well, it turned out he already has one.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, every year I think we all do this. You try to ebb, like, all right, I'm not going to get swayed by what I'm seeing in August. And then you see more and you start thinking it through and like, okay, I can get to a path to victory for Notre Dame. It's just really difficult. So no chance is not where I am, but it's tough. I mean, I've said this in some other places. Like, I feel like if we put this in basketball terms, Notre Dame is probably a really good mid-range jumper team, and Ohio State is the Golden State Warriors shooting threes. It's not like the mid-range jumper team can't win the game. It's just the efficiency required to do it is incredible. Whereas Ohio State has so many other outlets where they don't have to be perfect. They just have to get CJ Stroud to throw the ball up and see what happens, because it's probably going to be in Ohio State's favor.
Yeah, I like the analogy, but I thought you were going to go with the one we use for basketball, where it's just so easy for those top teams to get buckets. Like, they're 3 steps, they're down the court and dunking. And that's what Ohio State does have on Notre Dame right now. It's Notre Dame is going to have to finish off drives. If they stop Ohio State from finishing off some drives, I think Ohio State answers with more than Notre Dame in terms of 3 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Okay, let's go. Right, we're right back in it. Notre Dame can do it too. Chris Tyree turns the corner. Nobody on Ohio State's catching Chris Tyree. Let's be fair. Braden Lenzy too. But you know what? Braden Lenzy hasn't turned the corner since 2019 for a touchdown. Right. Okay.
Right.
Chris Tyree did it on a kickoff return. I mean, I'm not going to minimize that kickoff return. It was seismic. And,
Yeah.
But look, there's more of it at Ohio State, but there's a path. And anytime you can't see realistically one team going in and just absolutely putting it on the other one, but the other team could put it on that team. Like, only one team you think of this scenario could wait. Who's going to win 42-17? It's really hard to say Notre Dame would win 42-17, right?
Well, I don't know. I saw a prediction on our message board that said Notre Dame by 21.
I don't think Ohio State's winning 42-17 either. I'm just saying that things could go sideways more in that manner.
Yeah, I think that we all, in years past, when Notre Dame has been a substantial underdog, you favor the favored team. And I know that many times we've predicted those big point spreads to end up in the favor of the favorite. So but as this game gets closer, I feel differently about it. And if I can use a stat, which is a stat obviously from last year, and it's 2022, but I still think it's pertinent because these teams haven't changed. They can't change that much until they get in actual game competition. And the stat is this: Notre Dame had the 4th best red zone touchdown percentage defense in the country last year. Do you know what Ohio State was? They were 120. They were 120. When did I say it on a podcast?
No, you do it. You let us know.
Yeah.
This is
they
crazy.
were 100. They were 124th. They allowed a touchdown 3 out of every 4 times the opponent got to the red zone. Now, Notre Dame's got to get to the red zone, and they got to do it consistently, and then they have to follow through. And where I'm optimistic about that is, and I think we all agreed upon this, was that Notre Dame should be an improved red zone offense this year because Tyler Buckner's on the field. Now, they were. Again, we go by touchdown percentage.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a Charlie Weiss thing. Don't give me the scoring percentage. Tell me the touchdown percentage. And Notre Dame was not awful last year offensively at 37th, but that's a huge problem for Ohio State, which I have a great respect for Jim Knowles and what he's done. And people say, well, it took him a long time to turn things around at Duke and Oklahoma State. Well, turning around a Duke defense is going to take a little bit longer than it will an Ohio State defense. And when he took over to Oklahoma State, they were a bad defensive team then too. So he's a great defensive coordinator, but he's got to solve a problem that was really acute last year in the red zone.
Let me ask you, I was curious because you mentioned sort of a feeling about Notre Dame. How I was interested, like your guys' optimism or just like vibe about like Notre Dame can win the game. Like, is it more or less than the Clemson ACC championship game?
It is more for me than that. I was certain they were going to lose that game, but not in the way I was certain they're going to lose to Alabama. Like the Alabama, you could never have given me a scenario.
No, it was impossible. There was not a path to victory in that game.
I thought there was against Clemson. And then I watched Trevor Lawrence play again. But he, seriously though, like I know how good he is, but then I just realized, gosh, he makes such a difference in the running game. That kind of changed. As soon as that game started, I was looking at him run like, oh my gosh, they are going to really have a problem.
What about Georgia 2019?
I am.
We were all pretty pessimistic.
Yeah,
there.
I'm more confident in this one than that because I did not think Notre Dame's defense could hold up against the run in that game as well as they did.
Yeah,
remember it took them 9 weeks to look like we thought they might out at Michigan,
right,
where they couldn't hold up against the run.
I'm way more optimistic than I was for that game, and we caught a lot of crap for being so pessimistic about that game. And Notre Dame did a great job. I mean, they were in a position to win, even though they didn't run the football. Notre Dame was a double-digit underdog in the ACC championship game. I picked Clemson to win by double digits, not by much over the spread, but I did. But I don't disregard 17.5 point spreads like the average fan does out there, because these are the people that are creating the line are the ones with the big money, and that's why the reason they have the big money is because they're good at this.
All right. Well, I wrote a story on this yesterday, and I asked Brad Powers, professional gambler, does a great job. 34 wins, 396 losses since 1990 for FBS teams that were underdogs of 17 or 17.5 points. Exactly.
Jeez. Wow.
Okay. So there you go.
What were those numbers again?
34 wins, 396 losses.
Okay.
Not cover. We're not talking about cover because no Notre Dame fan can cover right now. Yeah. 34 wins and 396 losses.
Yeah.
Guess what? And one of the wins was Charlie Weiss in
2007.
Yeah.
That one doesn't
count.
That one doesn't
It's
count.
one of my favorite Notre Dame games of all time.
A couple other things, and I'm probably going to walk all over myself here in the second segment with the questions. And Pete, I don't know if you said it. I've heard other people say it, and I do think that there's some truth to this, in that Ohio State doesn't have a Bosa on the field. They don't have a Chase Young on the field. They're very optimistic about Jack Sawyer as their Leo. But none of their defensive line, their leading sack guy coming back is Zach Harrison with 4. So they don't have that type of player, number one, defensively. The other thing is, and I know Paris Johnson was a highly rated recruit, but he's playing left tackle for the first time. He's got to face Isaiah Foskey and Justin Adamalola. And that's not a given for Ohio State at the left tackle position. So just as you gather information for our lengthy preview, you keep finding more and more things, and I'm much more optimistic, contrary to other games when Notre Dame has been this significant of an underdog. And I'm not saying I'm predicting a win. I'm saying I'm predicting a battle, a game that is going to be a battle Saturday night.
I mean, even the Alabama game, I know it was over right away, but Notre Dame acquitted themselves pretty well in the trenches during a fair part of that game.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be, Alabama's offensive line
held their own, right?
They held their own the second half.
They didn't win those matchups.
No, but I think
they didn't get. I thought it could be.
Field.
It could have.
I think in the second half they won some of those battles with the offensive line, and you can say Alabama had a huge lead, and they didn't think that they're going to win, and that they were going to lose the game to Notre Dame. And
you'd be right.
And I get that, but the gap between Notre Dame and Ohio State
it's nothing like that. In fact, I think the defensive line. We'll save this for predictions, but when we watched Alabama on tape, because all year long you watched Alabama, you're just mesmerized by the three guys and how up and down the field and nobody could stop them. Then you watched them on tape and you thought, their offensive line is better than Notre Dame's. And Notre Dame's offensive line was the reason it was in the game, for crying out loud. And you're like, this is a massive, massive problem. And that is not
very alarming.
Here. Ohio State's offensive line, I don't think it's better than Notre Dame's. We'll find out. And then Ohio State's offensive line, I do not think is better than Notre Dame's defensive front. Whereas I never would have said that in the Alabama game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. This segment of Irish Illustrated was brought to you by Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, located on Fremont Street in historic downtown Las Vegas. Circa is the home of the world's largest sports book where you can watch up to 19 games at once. Want to be outside? No problem. There's no better place to take in all college football and NFL action than Stadium Swim. 6 pools on 3 levels and a 40-foot tall high-def screen to watch all the action. Irish fans, when you come to town to the Notre Dame BYU game, Circa is the place for you. For reservations and more information, go to circalasvegas.com. Segment 2 coming up, burning up the boards.
This is Mike Brown, former Notre Dame Leprechaun, here to share the Leprechauns Game Day at Notre Dame, an officially licensed children's book that celebrates the magic of a football Saturday at Notre Dame. Follow me on an adventure from Step Off Under the Golden Dome to ND Stadium with this perfect gift for Fighting Irish fans. Visit www.lepgameday.com and enter Irish to get your author-signed copy today. Go Irish!
Burning Up the Boards is brought to you by Game Day Your Way. Notre Dame football fans, make your trip to South Bend easy this fall with the help of Game Day Your Way. Services include tailgates, transportation, tickets, and more, making Game Day your one-stop shop for Notre Dame football weekend. Learn more at GameDayYourWay.com and use promo code IrishPod22 to save 10% on your tailgate package. Segment 2, Burning Up the Boards. First question from TJ from PA70. Coach Freeman made reference this week to a difficult and physical first 2 weeks of camp. How did his camp overall differ from the previous few in physicality and intensity? Do you believe the opening week at Ohio State increased the urgency or physicality over what you've normally seen?
Pete, why don't you go ahead? I already addressed that in segment.
I don't think Ohio State has a whole lot to do with it. I think it's more about Marcus Freeman trying to put a stamp on the program, and he's much more of a, I think, blue collar throwback kind of coach in terms of like how he values physicality in the run game and stopping the run than Brian Kelly was. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. I just think Freeman, for how modern Freeman comes across, he's actually quite throwback in terms of how his approach. So I think that's where that comes into play.
Yeah, I think the second part of the question's good. I mean, I understand. Do you believe though?
I
understand. I understand why you would need to ramp it up because the first opponent is Ohio State. But I agree with what Pete's saying. I think that is Marcus Freeman's MO, and that's what we're going to see and what we can expect moving forward as he tries to add the component that has been missing from taking Notre Dame to the next level, and that's elite skill position, talent, and speed.
I was gonna actually say I think both. I think Marcus Freeman is like this, and it will continue in other years. But I think Ohio State bled into everything for the last 8 months. If they were playing Marshall and Ohio State in week 4, I guess we'll find out next year, right? When they have Navy and then Ohio State.
I think he would. He would have done the same thing if Marshall had been the first opponent.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just along the lines of like pushing guys back. Like Jarrett Patterson would even be considering being put in the lineup right now if it wasn't Ohio State.
Well, that's a good point.
You would not be rushing him for that.
That's fair.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's why I think it bleeds a little bit. There's just it's like this is a huge thing.
Yeah. Question from UND Lax 2010. Assuming the turnover margin is between -1 and +1, do you see any path to ND winning?
Yeah, well, +1 would help. Over -1, it could be negligible in that way. But I think you touched on it. It's red zone situations. Pete might have brought it up. I don't know if we were just chatting, Peter. It was on a pod where you're like, 0 for 2 on 4th down becomes 0 for 3 on 4th down for Ohio State. And 3rd and 7 is owned by Notre Dame, not Ohio State. When Ohio State has, Ohio State on 3rd and 7 at midfield, they convert that a lot, right? You got to stop them from converting that this time. Those are pretty important. That Notre Dame wins 3rd downs it can win, and wins 4th down all the time, and is the better red zone team. That's the path for.
Yeah, I was to say, like, by far the most interesting thing about the Oregon game from last year is that Ohio State was 0 for 3 on 4th down. Because that's a turnover, even though in the box score it's not. Right. Could Notre Dame win with an even turnover margin? Yeah, but there would have to be 2 4th down stops probably in there as well.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler Buckner throwing incompletions is okay. That's
Oh yeah.
When we talk about accuracy, incompletions are okay. Now, if they really struggle completing passes, then it's not good enough. But the incompletions are okay. It's the turnovers. It's the critical turnovers in your own territory that you just have to avoid. And that's for me, as everyone knows, that's the concerning part for me, especially if Notre Dame struggles a little bit running the football. Although I do expect Notre Dame to try to pound as much as they possibly can. But you've got to protect the football, or turnovers on dropbacks, fumbles, strip sacks, that kind of stuff. I'm not breaking any ground with these comments, but in this setting, those are the things that you absolutely have to avoid. And if you throw incomplete on 3rd and 7 to live for another day, as long as you're in the game at that point, then you put your strongest part of your team on the field, and that's your defense going against a potentially great offense, of course.
Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like Tyler Buckner's only turnover he can have is when it's 2nd and 15 from his own 45 and he takes a shot downfield and might get picked off or something along those lines. You can't have red zone turnovers going in. You can't have red zone turnovers the other way. And it's a tall task when you're a 17-point underdog. There's one acceptable turnover. Next from Vil Irish, list these personnel groupings from most to least frequently used against Ohio State. 11 personnel, 12, or 21.
The order, right? I mean, isn't that the order?
That's the order. Yeah.
I mean, I think 12 will be closer to 11 than it normally would.
Right.
But 11 will still be the leader.
Yeah, I think 12 will challenge 11. 21. It's an interesting question because they're certainly going to intersperse that in there too. I like when we get not referring to this question, but questions like I think we did in Monday's podcast. It's two extremes. Well, somewhere in between is going to lie reality. This is a good question because I do think 12 is key. I know, Pete, that's been a talking point for you all week, and I totally agree with that. I think that's huge. There was a comment made by Jim Knowles that, and I thought this was really interesting because now that he's a part of the Big Ten, 5 DBs, they like to run the 4-2-5, 5 DBs. He can't use that as much as he did in the Big 12. He's got to put 3 linebackers out there on occasion. And so I think that's kind of a dilemma for him, especially as they face 12 personnel. I think they might have to get away, especially if Notre Dame's having some success offensively. They might have to get away from his preferred alignment with 5 DBs. And he does some really great things with those guys. And he brought over McAllister from Oklahoma State, who, obviously he knows everything they need to do. Can he transfer all that knowledge to his teammates on the fly? That's a little bit difficult to do. But he does some interesting things with his safeties, and he brings pressures from that back 5 that make it very difficult. But I would say, I guess I agree with you there, Pete, 11 most of the time because that's conventional, but 12 approaching it, and some 21 to keep, Tommy Rees is very creative with personnel and alignments.
Tim, did you hear what Al Golden said when Pete and I were interviewing him? Pete was asking him about what the 12 package does and challenges people. And obviously Michael Mayer's the biggest part of it. And Al Golden said, well, he just said it. I don't need to say it again. You put a linebacker on Mayer, it's a plus for him. You put a safety on him, right. He better be very long. You put a nickel on him, you can get bounced out of the bar. You know what I mean? That was a great line.
That's a great line. You're right. He was the better interview that day. But Tommy was talking to Tommy Rees about 4-2-5 and what they can do. And, I've asked that question now a couple times, and I asked Marcus Freeman today, and they're going to be really obviously very generic in how they answer that. But
right.
Yeah, those are some of the things to keep in mind. Question from David Lopez 5: after spring and fall camp, which of the freshmen do you think is most likely to be a first round pick? Whoa, that's projecting.
Yeah, that is. I'm not changing.
It's a good question. It's interesting.
I'm ignoring. I ignore everything about the freshmen while they're freshmen. So Snead and Schroff are still my choices, even though they are not involved in the 2022 season whatsoever, because that's 4 years away.
Man,
but that's a wretch. What? Snead? Oh, geez, Snead. Yeah.
He just got here.
I know. I have a hard time keeping track, though. The guys sometimes that enter early. You said Snead. I'm like, no, he's a redshirt freshman.
I thought he'd be involved. He's not. It does.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
I'll go Shrouth and Jadarian Price.
Well, I love Strauss' game. I'm not sure that I'm going to sit here and pick him over some of these other guys. I mean, Tobias Merriweather at his size could certainly be a guy that emerges like that. Strauss wouldn't have been one of the first guys I said, probably, especially because he's probably an interior lineman who are picked even less than tackles.
I was just thinking there might be a few Tobias Merriweathers coming out in a few years. This college sport we watch these days.
Well, no, that's true. But why can't he be one of the? I mean, he's highly rated. He's impressive. His agility and his ability to make, twisting catches and stuff. I mean, we're projecting a long way off from now. Jaden Mickey's pretty small to be, a guy like that. But I would stick with Merriweather for now. Tuihalamaka, again, not necessarily a Mike linebacker going in the first round, but
that's what I was thinking.
Everybody's been very impressed with what he's done.
I didn't take that as whose stock has gone up and who's gone down, because I listed guys whose stock did not go up in camp. But Jeremiah Usu-Kormoa didn't play as a freshman. I was still pretty high on that guy.
Or a sophomore.
Yeah, that's right. Next from GWeave 5. Any update on Jarrett Patterson? It's pretty important.
He practiced yesterday. I'm not sure that anybody's in a position to declare him a starter for the Ohio State game. I just think I'm going to look, things change, and he is a miraculous recoverer from injuries. He heals from things in an incredible way. But the first thing that we heard about Jarrett Patterson when this injury occurred was that he wasn't only going to miss the Ohio State game, he was going to miss the month of September.
Right.
So
correct.
I am not optimistic. I think he could play. I think he could start. I don't have a real good feeling about him being effective against Ohio State.
It feels like he's far enough along where he will give it a go in warmups, and then they'll have to decide. Is that kind of how it feels to you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, and Jarrett Patterson being Jarrett Patterson, if in the situation that you just described, that he's on the field and with the mindset he's preparing to start, then he probably will, because he's a very strong-willed kid. But we didn't hear it or see it when it first happened, and I'm not much more optimistic than we were at that time. Question from Tim.
No, go right ahead.
Sure?
I think that, I just think that it's hard if he was doing scout team reps on Wednesday, Coach Freeman said today, and some varsity. I think it's an indication that it would have to be a heck of a 72-hour period for Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah, no matter how well he heals
right.
or how quickly he heals. Question from Irish from A2. Would you feel more or less confident in a positive outcome of the game on Saturday if Brian Kelly was still the coach? That's an interesting question.
It is. I feel like I know less about the season because he's not the coach, but this game is just tough to figure. Like, I don't think I'd feel more positive if Brian Kelly was the coach of this particular game, just because he has some issues in mismatched games of not getting out to good starts. As I pointed out, 39 losses for Kelly, 22 of them he was down by 2 scores pretty quickly. Wow. So I would not be more confident. I would be less confident. I knew what I was getting in a season with Brian Kelly. They're going to beat Boston College and Syracuse and North Carolina and BYU. And you know what I'm saying? That's kind of how I feel about those.
Here's what if Brian Kelly was the head coach, I would say, take Notre Dame in the points. You can put any sum of money on it. It doesn't matter. Notre Dame will cover. I think they would be a lock to cover in this game, but
regardless, you're saying
would not be a money line bet. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
Well, I don't know how Marcus Freeman will do in his first game at Ohio State as a 17.5-point underdog, but I know what Brian Kelly did in big games as massive underdogs. I guess I would say Marcus Freeman. It's a lot of it it's the great unknown.
Yeah.
But
it's more fun to have the great unknown here.
Yeah, I would take the great unknown to the known, and the previous known was not usually great in these situations, as it is for most coaches, is this substantial of an underdog.
Next from Seaside Sox fan. Why does the national media talk as if there will be zero drop-off to the Ohio State receivers? Replacing a first-round draft choice is hard, let alone 2. 5-star recruits or not, only one guy returns with any production. There's got to be a drop-off.
To answer the question, I think the reason is that their quarterback is just a dead eye throwing the football. Now, again, it's first game of the season, and he probably won't be as good in first game of the season as he will second and third and moving forward. But I think part of that reason is because CJ Stroud is so incredibly accurate, and he completed 72% of his passes. He was one of only 2 quarterbacks in the country that averaged double digits per pass attempt. The other one was at Coastal Carolina. So, I mean, I think a lot of it is an assumption that you just churn them out. They just keep churning them out. And I think we all believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be really, really good. But I would say, point taken. It's not a gimme that he has chemistry with all those guys. It is a gimme that he has chemistry with Smith and Jigba, who could catch 12 or 13 passes and put quite a dent in a defense in those 12 or 13 receptions.
We all feel like Lorenzo Styles sort of had a breakout game in the Fiesta Bowl.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yep. If Lorenzo Styles put up 15 catches for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Fiesta Bowl, I think we would be like, this is a future first round pick. Like, this guy's incredible. Like, automatic. He's going to torch Ohio State. I mean, that was Jackson Smith and Jigba's stat line in the Rose Bowl.
And I mean, Marvin Harrison had 3
touchdowns.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns as well.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. So,
is there
going to be a drop off from 2 first round picks? Yeah.
Yep.
But they might just have 2 more first round picks.
Both things are true. There will be a drop off, and they reloaded.
Instead of having an unknown at quarterback, they have a Heisman Trophy favorite at quarterback. That's a big difference from last year.
And, Fleming, I haven't seen a whole lot of Fleming on film, but we know that he's really, really highly touted. Egbuka is a great return man who's just getting started as a receiver. I just say the question, point taken, but recognize that these guys have recruited at a level where they create these expectations.
Yes.
Right out of the gate.
Let's be fair to the question and the reality of it. If Wilson and Olave were coming back too, I would not see a path to victory for Notre Dame. So there's a drop off.
I agree with you there. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And good question from Seaside Sox fan. Statman 72. If Notre Dame loses to Ohio State, which comment summarizing the game would you prefer to be true? The offense did its job, but the defense couldn't stop them, or the defense did its job, but the offense didn't carry its weight?
Ooh, what would I prefer to be true?
So for 11 games going forward,
the first one, because I enjoy watching offense.
I would just be so surprised that the defense is the reason they lose the game at this point. I guess that's not true because the secondary could get lit up like a Christmas tree. If Ohio State runs all over Notre Dame and they don't generate a pass rush and they don't look anything special up front, that's the worst sign.
Well,
yeah.
Shame on Notre Dame if Ohio State runs the football all over.
Right. I guess the best sign is the offense did its job because the defense you'd think is going to come along, right?
Yeah. No, definitely.
The defense did not do its job against Florida State. There we go.
Right, exactly. And they still finished in the top 15 in scoring defense again. Yeah, that the concern is on offense, and so if they did their job, that's a good thing. I want to another, not necessarily stat, but observation that the 2 best defenses that Ohio State went against last year were Penn State and Michigan, both top 10 in scoring defense. So Ohio State scored 33 against Penn State, and they scored 27 against Michigan. And I put Notre Dame's defense in the same category as Penn State's last year and Michigan's last year. So
although Michigan was pretty good, that end of the year thing, Michigan had it rolling and Notre Dame's going first game out. The first game.
No, true. I mean, they were a juggernaut at that point. They were not going to lose that game to Ohio State on any circumstances. But my point being that I think Notre Dame's defense is a quality defense, and therefore I'm looking at Ohio State in the 31 to 34 point range. If it gets above that, now we need Statman 72's phrase there. The offense did its job, but the defense couldn't stop them. Now you need that to happen. But they led the nation in scoring because they were phenomenal. But let's face it, they beat up some really bad defenses in the process too. But that, the scoring averages, both offensively and defensively, that's usually the case.
Sure.
The 66 and Notre Dame scored against 66 against New Mexico. I mean, that throws everything. That throws the cumulative stats out of whack.
Next from CMU Pens fan, always good to get a first time caller here. Is it a fair comparison?
I swear I don't. I don't have a buy. I don't know CMU Pens fan.
I just enjoyed. I enjoyed when they trolled us on Twitter.
He always submits questions. So
when One Foot Down trolled us on Twitter a few years ago and pretended if I write in as Statman or CMU Pens fan, I will.
All right, that's it. I'm gonna. He will not be on either one of the.
Sorry, man. That's
the podcast next week.
CMU Pens fan does ask, is it a fair comparison for Chris Tyree's season this year, the final season of Dexter Williams' Notre Dame career? So Tyree is a junior without the problems. Dexter Williams is a senior who we all knew could play football.
I'm becoming very, very bullish on Chris Tyree this season, but I wouldn't compare it. I wouldn't compare it to Dexter Williams. I wouldn't compare it to Dexter Williams because I think he's a different kind of back. And now they'll use him in a variety of ways. And, they're going to get I think they're going to get the football in his hands a whole lot more, but it won't necessarily be the straight handoff variety.
Yeah, I think that would be an ideal outcome. But I think Chris Tyree he's different, and that feels like a stretch, even though I think he's going to have a good year.
Yeah, I like Chris Tyree a lot, and he can do that 97-yard run to turn a game around that Dexter Williams did. But boy, we were high on Dexter Williams going into that year. Like that was,
he
missed 4 games and had 998 yards.
We've never been at a practice where Chris Tyree shook somebody so bad they fell down.
No, and
that happened with Dexter Williams.
So good in those practices his senior year.
And Dexter Williams, he was more of a true, pure running back.
Yeah,
than Tyree is. Tyree is a combo.
Even though we knew he was suspended, they were never going to say it, but they were using him in that open practice, the big August practice. That we thought to ourselves, what do we finally have? Is this intel completely wrong? But nope, they were just using him. But he tore it up in that practice.
I again, all very bullish on the progress that Chris Tyree has made physically. Yes. Love the kid's emotionless kind of approach to things and cerebral approach to things. I'm looking for him to have a really strong finish in the second half of his collegiate career with Notre Dame.
NDFB. If Notre Dame gets the win Saturday night, would they be ranked number 1 in both polls, one poll, or neither poll? That's a great question.
It is a great question because I think they'd be number 2. I just think, I just think that would people really, I saw some other question that if Notre Dame beats Ohio State, which talking head is the first to say that Ohio State was overrated? Feinbaum? I think Feinbaum, is he going to be the one? I think they'd be number 2. I mean, unless they hammered Ohio State, which
I think it'd just be number 2.
I don't know that that's very realistic, but I think
what were they ranked him in 1981 when they went to number 1?
You're going to ask me a ranking from 81. with the way my brain works these days,
I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out real fast. 81. This is bad radio. You guys talk.
They would be. I think they'd be ranked number 2, and I think they would be getting first place votes.
That's fair. I think that's a good way of putting it. There would be voters, on both coaches and the media, that would say would reward them for going to Ohio State.
And I think you're spot on. Ohio State would be discussed as like, are they overrated? Are they a fraud? Which is totally fine because that team has said, like, if we don't win a national championship, this team is a disappointment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Watching Ryan Day's press conference and seeing Jim Knowles' press conference. I mean, especially Ryan Day's, the talk is winning the national title. Not having a great year. I can see, I mean, not just having a great year, winning the national title. I can see them getting to the national title game. And look, ultimately, I don't know that their defense is good enough, and maybe their offensive line probably isn't good enough.
2 thoughts. If Notre Dame beat Alabama to open the season, and Ohio State was number 1 and Alabama was number 2 or 3, Notre Dame would become number 1 because they have
yes.
earned the benefit of, we know Alabama's not going to stink.
Yeah.
And number 2, Tim, in 1981, Notre Dame opened at number 4 against unranked LSU, won 27-9, and was ranked number 1 the next week. And then they were ranked number 13 the following week, and then they were not ranked again.
Do you guys, neither of you are old enough to remember this, but I mean, the uproar over Jerry Faust at Notre Dame winning his first game and moving up to number 1, how much they jump?
4-1, and then they lost to Michigan
25-7.
And fell to 13.
You know where I was during that Michigan game?
I know you were at the USC game in 77, but I don't know where you were at the Michigan game.
No, I was playing a fall baseball game for Notre Dame at Lewis University. Where is Lewis? It's in Illinois. So I did not see that game. I listened to it on the bus trip back, and it wasn't going well. It didn't go very well henceforth
the rest of the way.
The rest of the way for Jerry Faust. Judge Arthur Vandelay. Final predictions for the season.
10-2.
I am with you.
I would say 10-2 first. I would say 9-3 second.
I'd agree with that too.
Let's say Notre Dame beats Ohio State. Do you change your prediction by 1 or 2?
Probably
or keep it the
1.
same. Or do you keep it the same? I don't keep it the same.
I would probably 1, because I do think that Clemson's going to be really good this year, and that's going to be very difficult to beat them with their D line. And I don't know. I don't know how good USC is going to be. And every time. Right? Yeah. Sure. All right. Question from Dan Ernst. Football's back, and Notre Dame fans will start the 2022 season by making the journey to Ohio State for the first time since 1995. Hypothetically speaking, if you and your friends were road tripping to this or any game, what would be your must-have road trip snacks and beverages? And besides canned cherry Coke for O'Malley, and then the second part is all-time favorite road trip song for getting hyped for a game.
He's right that the cherry Coke must be canned. That is extremely important. Takes on the ice better.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. When Coke came out to my house, because Pete put it on Twitter and everything went crazy 5 years ago, they brought me canned cherry Coke. I was very proud of them. But I would like some Fiji water, and I am making sandwiches for this trip because I know you don't like peanut butter, Tim. So I'll be making tuna and egg salad.
I don't like peanut butter. I love peanut butter.
Yeah, what's wrong with peanut butter?
I was quoting George Costanza. And
I'm sorry. Sorry. I gotta be ready at all times.
Layup right there, too, guys. But I'll be making sandwiches for this trip, and I would like some Fiji water from my my driver.
I'm sorry, Pete. Go ahead.
No, Fiji water is a must. I'm a bit of a prince when it comes to my water and my hydration, so I need Fiji. And then I'm a big. I like the pretzel cheddar cheese combos. Like I don't eat combos at any time
old school,
other than on road trips. And then
it's
some
like
peanut M&Ms. Yeah, no, I'm like I have a very high end water taste, but then low end snacks.
What kind of sandwich do you want?
I'll
be going to Martin's later.
Okay, if you get some roast beef from a carving station or something, that would be delightful.
Right,
thank you.
Gotcha. Priester sandwich meat? Anything?
Turkey.
Peanut butter, I heard. Okay.
Turkey.
All right.
Yeah. I'm not like you guys. I mean, there are 3 meals a day, 365 days a year. Bottled water, any brand is fine with me. But as a youngster, when I'd get together with our friends, my friends for a road trip, I know one of the songs that we would play was "Let It Roll Down the Highway" by Bachman Turner Overdrive, because it was so appropriate for the trip. So that would be mine. No beer on the way. No, nothing like that. When we get there, we're going to wrap up. Thanks, Dan Ernst. We're going to wrap up with game predictions.
I will go first.
Don't take if you do it again, I'm going to be really mad. I wrote down my number. All right.
I think mine's a little bit off, so I think that we're safe. But I think that Notre Dame's defense will play well and hold not hold Ohio State down, but I think they're going to be able to sort of keep the top on the game. My bigger concern is Notre Dame's offense getting out of third gear and their inability to create explosive plays, I think. So I'm going Ohio State 31, Notre Dame 23. I think it will be a competitive game. I think Notre Dame will come out of it having gained a little bit of credibility nationally for people that just think they're going to get blown off the field. And I think it gives the offense some urgency that they need to grow from this. And I think the defense, it gives them a real solid platform to keep going the rest of the year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm a little higher on the score. I have 34-27, Ohio State. And I feel it's a little bit of Notre Dame doesn't maintain consistent offense throughout the game, which will put the defense in a couple of binds in Oklahoma State. And that was that Oklahoma State game.
It's
too.
OSU.
But Ohio State can take advantage of it, Notre Dame's defense, when they are put in a bind. I do think Notre Dame's offense will look good at times. I don't think it's a finished product yet. And I am not 100% sure you can turn a bad offensive line without Jarrett Patterson into a playoff level offensive line in game one. They could. Maybe they're really good again. They have 2 first-round draft picks. You're most likely missing Jarrett Patterson. I want to see that unit before I think Notre Dame can go out there and absolutely run the ball. Because they couldn't run the ball on anybody that existed last year.
Yeah.
With a pulse.
Yeah. And that was even with Jarrett Patterson early on.
Right.
I think most of what I'm hearing on the outside is they love the over, which is why the line keeps going up. I like the under a lot, not by a lot per se, but I like the under a lot. Of course, I'll have a prediction in the preview on Friday, but
Pete went under and I just pushed over for reference.
Yeah, I know Pete went under on it. I'm going to agree with him. My score is probably going to be fairly comparable to that. So obviously I'm saying that Notre Dame will cover. So all three of us are saying that. We will catch a lot of heat if it doesn't go in that direction, but that's how I feel. I mean, that's legitimately how I feel, contrary to a lot of other times when Notre Dame's been in this situation. And I don't know that it's necessarily because of Marcus Freeman per se. It's just trying to analyze 2 football teams. And I agree with what you guys are saying, Tim. I think Notre Dame will have some offensive success. I think it's going to be hard to sustain that over the course of the game. I like the under. Well, that's it for today. We'll be heading down the road to Columbus tomorrow. And the next time you hear from O'Malley and me, it will be from Ohio Stadium, our pregame coverage of Notre Dame versus Ohio State. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. Fantastic. It's time to get this thing going and stop speculating and watch a football game between 2 top 5 teams. We'll talk to you then. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.